Do you mind if we close the door?
No, go ahead. That's probably a good idea. You can sit there too if you like.
Thank you. Oops.
Hopefully, you know what, let me tell the receptionist to answer the phone. It probably won't. But let me, if the phone rings, can you pick it, if you see my extension ringing, can you pick it up and just take a message? Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you. The phone never rings unless I don't want it to.
So.
You know what, there's also, do you know how to operate that keyboard to turn down the radio that's on there? I don't want that to be in there. There you go. Thank you.
Alright. So my first question was, how did you find out about the Compton Cookout?
Actually, I was probably one of the first administrators or professors to find out, because it just so happened that I teach an education studies course every quarter. And I happened to have one of the board members of the Black Student Union and a board member of METCHA that was in my class that quarter. So we meet every Tuesday afternoon, and I don't remember how we got into the subject, but right at the beginning of class, I may have asked because I knew that the previous weekend there was a combined BSU and METCHA event. They did their annual high school conference together, which they don't normally do, but that year they did. So I asked about it, and they said, you know, the bad thing was that yesterday we heard about this event that took place, and they shared the invitation that had gone out from the fraternity. And so we talked about it, and after class, I wrote an email to the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, along with the gentleman who oversees all like campus life programs, including student organizations, including fraternities. And so I told them, I don't know that this is, you know, this is the only thing that I know about. You know, it's all the information I have, but that they may want to know about this incident that took place. And so supposedly they looked into it, and then I think from there things began to escalate. They did bring in the fraternity members that were responsible, or at least were involved with sponsoring the Compton Cookout. My understanding is it was not an official fraternity event, but it was fraternity members who were mainly responsible for organizing it and inviting folks. So that was the origins. That was how I found out directly, was from students. And apparently there were some excuse me, African American students that were members of mainstream fraternities, and they had seen this invitation going out, and they were also involved in BSU, and they told BSU, and they also told the people that sent the invitation out that, you know, this is not cool. But they were told basically to be quiet, was my understanding, and so others as well that saw it felt a lot of pressure not to say anything to anyone. But through them, the word got to BSU and told them what had happened, and then I think they probably did their own internal complaint within Student Affairs as well.
So there's like a lot of media coverage, like outside media coverage. How did it leak out to the greater media then? You should probably sit down.
That I'm not 100% sure of. I really don't know if anybody did any actual formal press releases or contact with media. So that's a good question. I'm not sure the genesis. I mean, once some of them got a hold of it, then it was all over the place, and we even had national media here. But I'm not sure how the initial notice went out to the media. It might have been that the mass activities that took place, there were protests on campus in rallies almost that same week, I think, or within a week or so of that. And so they may have been informed about those or heard about them and came out and covered them, and then began to probe into the story after that.
And since you knew like members of BSU and MECA, had you seen other events like this previously that hadn't gotten that coverage, or was this like first time?
This was the first time that I'd been directly made aware of an event like that. I'd heard indirectly rumors about those kinds of events before, and I was a little bit aware that this was beginning to be part of a national phenomena, that these kinds of parties where primarily white fraternities would dress up, you know, in caricatures of blacks, or they might have a party that would make fun of illegal immigrants and dress up like what their caricature was of pregnant Mexican women or Mexican laborers and so forth. So I knew that these things were part of a larger pattern going on across the country, but that was the first time I was directly aware of one of those things happening here at UCSD.
So would you say you weren't surprised that something like this happened?
No, I was not surprised at all. And in fact, I think that was part of my general overall reaction and reaction of some of the student leaders that were involved, because I've been a part of advocacy groups for years, probably almost 20 years before that, that had made countless recommendations to the administration about the campus climate here and about the admissions policies and the students that were getting admitted, and about things like the Koala newspaper, and complaints about the lack of representation of blacks and Chicanos at all levels. And what my feeling was, I think like a lot of folks, was that the administration was sending the message by marginalizing blacks and Chicanos themselves that it was okay for others to do it as well, including students. So in that sense, as somebody said after the Compton Cookout, this was almost a logical response by the white students, if you look at it from that perspective, because they had received so many subtle cues about the lack of priority that underrepresented students have on the campus. So again, they evidently felt it was fair game to make fun of them and to have a very derogatory party at their expense.
Now, how do you think the administration or the chancellor handled the event? Like, do you see that they sort of pushed it aside, or like what are your thoughts in general about?
Well, it's a lot. It's a long story, but one of the things I think is a very important preface to the Compton Cookout is that the Black Student Union submitted a report to the chancellor in the summer of 2009. So this was about 6 months or so before the Compton Cookout. And it was the best report that I've ever seen in all my years here, as far as a report put together by a student organization. And it pointed out the lack of black students, the lack of black faculty, curriculum, had data, had qualitative information. It was a really good study, and it had, I believe, 3 or 4 very specific recommendations, ways in which BSU wanted to work with the administration as partners to try to end the underrepresentation of blacks on the campus. I remember one of the recommendations was for institutional support of a Black Student Union overnight visit for admitted black students that might want to come to UCSD. And so they submitted this report, I believe, in September of 2009. And from what they told me, the administration's response was almost one of not doing anything or not wanting to make any commitments to work with BSU, which in retrospect was a huge mistake, because if they had embraced that report, if the administration had accepted it and entered into a working partnership with BSU, all that would have been happening at the time of the Compton Cookout. And when the administration tried to come forward and pose themselves as allies to the black students, it probably would have been accepted. It would have made sense. But because the administration had basically ignored that report, when they tried to step up and act as if they were concerned about the black students, the students weren't having any of that. And they saw it as a very hypocritical stance. And also, I think, the administration was, they were good in the sense of being willing to listen to the students and to sit down and talk with them. But it seemed like all they wanted to do was to, almost like a mass psychological movement of trying to kind of relieve the students of their pain. So they did a good job of acknowledging the pain that the students were suffering and what their feelings were, but the students, of course, wanted to move on from that, and that's why the slogan like "real pain, real action" came about, that from their pain they expected there to be some administrative changes in the way that the university did business. And so I think I was very fortunate, because like a few people, I was invited by the Black Student Union to sit in on the quote-unquote negotiations with the administration after BSU had submitted its initial demands. So they submitted, I think, I want to say 19 demands. And there was a series of 2 meetings over 2 days, probably about 8 hours altogether in meetings. And the chancellor was there with all of the deans of the academic divisions on campus, all of the vice chancellors, the officers, the top officers of the academic senate, university's legal council, all of the college provosts. So there were probably 15 to 20 administrators, and I think all but maybe 2 of them were white. And there was the membership of BSU, their leadership, along with the leadership of MECHA, a couple of other organizations in the SAC community, and again a handful of faculty and staff that had been invited to be there in support of BSU. And that was a real incredible experience to witness. These highly educated, very powerful white folks at the top of the administrative hierarchy that had clearly no clue how to respond to the students and no clue what to do with the demands that they had made. So we went through each demand, systematically. The meeting was chaired by Gary Matthews, who's the Vice Chancellor of Resources on campus. He mainly oversees facilities and parking and so forth. Really has nothing to do with the educational program for students on campus. But because he was black, they put him in charge of the meeting. Gary actually did a very good job, I thought, of conducting the meeting and listening to the students and making sure that other folks listened to them. For the most part, the administration agreed to the demands of the students. There were a lot of small changes made or small adjustments, but so in that sense, I think they did maybe the best they could at the time, but it was really sad to see in terms of the total lack of expertise and knowledge on how to deal with these issues. And that's why, like, I talk to the students in my classes all the time now about that as a lesson to learn. That's why we talk about cultural competence and making sure that people graduate from UCSD understanding these communities, understanding black and Chicano communities, what their histories have been and their cultures are, so that if they have to get into an issue where